good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. So I just want to share a few words about to set the stage for our webinar before I introduce our guests and our moderator. So we're really excited to bring you a rich conversation today that will dive into an urgent challenge across every state right now, teacher recruitment and retention. And we are intentionally focusing on rural regions because we know that the challenges and opportunities are very different between rural and non-rural areas. And we also have one great urban example out of New Hampshire to share with you as well today. So in this webinar, you will learn about innovative approaches to teacher recruitment and retention and associated partnerships and strategies that you can take back to your district and state to draw inspiration from. You will hear about collaboration between various sets of universities, districts, state education agencies, philanthropies, nonprofits, and even the AmeriCorps program, and how this kind of collaboration is critical to meeting this urgent and widespread need to strengthen our teacher pipeline. You will hear about the importance of teacher voice and designing solutions that are both responsive to district needs at the same time that they are forward thinking about how to attract our next generation of teachers to want to stay in this profession. I hope that you will leave our time today inspired and motivated to apply some of the strategies and ideas you hear to your own communities so that every student has access to a great teacher who is also happy in their role and has opportunities to grow in their career. And with that, it's my honor to introduce today's guest. So as I introduce you, if you can please turn on your video. So first, I'd like to welcome Jason Judd, EDD, Executive Director with Educate Maine. Jason has been with Educate Maine for 8 years, and before that, he has worked as a teacher, college and career counselor, director of studies, and dean of academics at Maine Central Institute and Independent High School. Welcome, Jason. Next, we have Audrey Rogers, EDD, Associate Dean with Graduate Education Programs and Professor of Education with the Southern New Hampshire University. And Audrey is past president and current member of the New Hampshire Institutions of Higher Education Network, a consortium of all New Hampshire educator preparation programs. Her recent research focused on competency-based education and assessment literacy and pre-service educators. Welcome, Audrey. Next up is Flynn Ross, EDD, Chair and Professor of Teacher Education at the University of Southern Maine. And you see some great backgrounds here as well at their universities. And Flynn has coordinated graduate and undergraduate cohorts of teacher candidates for over 25 years. And her co-edited book, Decolonizing Classroom Management, is due out in October, which is very exciting. So welcome, Flynn. And last but not least, we have Nathan Sorber, PhD, Director of the School of Education at the College of Applied Human Sciences with West Virginia University. Nate is the author of several books on education and has written extensively on land-grant colleges, the development of American higher education, and the relationship between education and the economy. Welcome, Nate. And all of these discussions will be moderated by our moderator, Betsy Mijares, EDD, Program Officer of Education and Economic Opportunities with the TLL Temple Foundation. And she'll share more with you about the foundation, but that is located in rural East Texas. And before joining the foundation, Dr. Mijares' career included roles as a teacher, principal, director of bilingual and ESL programs at Lufkin School District, and adjunct professor at Sam Houston State. Dr. Mijares actively participates in community organizations and continues to positively impact students and families in deep East Texas. So with that, Betsy, I'm thrilled to hand it over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon from Deep East Texas. I see the background. This is exactly what it looks like here in Deep East Texas and good old Piney Woods. And thank you, CGLR, for this opportunity. I want to provide you just some quick context and background of Temple Foundation. We are a family philanthropic organization focused on creating lasting impact through partnerships, resource, leveraging the needs of rural and underserved communities in our region. Each key program area, if you go to the next slide, each program area is managed and dedicated by program officers aligned with our foundation strategic plan. And so for education, our strategic plan emphasizes early literacy, numeracy, post-secondary success, and workforce development. Of course, we have various strategies, but that's specifically with education. And this gives you a map overview of our program areas, but also the area that we cover. We cover 22 counties in rural East Texas, and again, along through the border of Louisiana. And so this is the organization that our foundation works with in impacting our rural communities as well. You can go to the next slide. Again, with the focus of, since the topic is teacher recruitment and retention, I kind of want to share some of the initiatives that we're working on as a foundation. As far as recruitment, we have a partnership with Texas A&M University, Texarkana, and it's focused on teacher preparation program, launching the Eagles Teach initiative in partnership with 4 local rural school districts in our area and the community college. This initiative aims to enhance the teacher pipeline in East Texas by offering 2 pathways for high school students interested in education careers. We know it's very difficult to find teachers, so we need to start at earlier the better at the high school level. The first pathway targets students pursuing dual credit coursework with a focus on education, enabling them to graduate with a CTE, public service endorsement, and a Texas Education Agency paraprofessional certificate. And obviously, we want to encourage them to continue on. So the second pathway allows students to graduate Texas Core Complete with all their basics and directly enter into teacher certification program at Texas A&M University, Texarkana. And the goal is for them to prepare them to be classroom ready within 4 semesters after high school. So that's a really impressive work that we're working on. This program includes extensive support from local school districts and colleges, offering dual credit courses. There are activities for students from grades 3 through 12th grade, such as summer camps, career fairs, professional development, just to cultivate the interest and skills in education, because we know we can have paraprofessionals, teachers, principals, all that is a need, especially right now. The other focus is retention. We have the teacher incentive allotment in Texas that was impacted by TEA. And this is a program implemented in Texas that aims to reward and incentivize high quality teaching in public schools. TIA is an opportunity to provide additional funding to districts that develop and implement strategic plans to recruit, retain, and reward effective educators. So, for example, we have, I was just talking to a district recently, and one of their teachers was able to receive $22,000 on top of their current salary. And so we all recognize, especially with our rural areas here, and some of our districts may not have the funding or the capacity. So we know that we don't want that to be a hindrance for those local districts to miss out on this TIA, teacher incentive allotment opportunity. So the TL Temple Foundation supported the Texas Impact Network to assist 8 rural East Texas school districts in developing and implementing teacher evaluation and compensation system to meet the requirements from Texas Education Agency and their deadlines, because that can be very extensive, time consuming, and some of our districts do not have the capacity, although they want to, but the time restraints, some school districts that we have, it really is just 2 people running the district, the superintendent or assistant superintendent, if that, if that's even available for those districts. So it is a very tedious application process, and we wanted to make sure that these districts were supporting this initiative. So with that, our Texas Impact Network was able to help them write this and get approval for them to take part of the TIA incentive allotment. If you can go to the next slide, please. And then, there's several initiatives that our state is doing in order to help with the need of retention and recruitment. But I wanted to highlight two of the tasks. We have the task force, CEA Rural Schools Task Force. The task force identified these are the priority issues, again, with teacher recruitment, retention, House Bill 5, career and CTE support, and grants and contracts. This was created by Commissioner Mike Morath in 2016. Knowing that it was formed to identify current challenges and best practices for rural school districts statewide and develop recommendations for TEA that would support rural school districts in overcoming obstacles and meeting the needs of students. So these recommendations for these issues, as well as some general recommendations, provide a substantial leverage for supporting the pressing needs of our school districts. We all know that and I know some of you are going to discuss this with our panelists, is we have the educator preparation programs, our EPPs. Another initiative that is another resource to support transparency and accountability in teacher preparation is our ed preps, our EPPs, to be evaluated. And it's being upfront and including the accreditation status, candidate admissions, and performance. as you see listed here, field observations, and we're getting feedback from teachers. Was this helpful? Was this effective for you? And so there's a link there for you to check it out, and it has several components in order to evaluate universities' EPP programs. And as we know right now with recent data, approximately 23% of our teachers in Texas are not fully certified. This also reflects on ongoing challenges with teacher certification, recruitment. And then we also, from the Texas Tribune, approximately 77% of Texas teachers have considered leaving the profession. So how do we retain them? How do we recruit them? And so I just wanted to give you some context and background about the TLL Temple Foundation's work, but also what is our state doing in order to address this, and how can we fix this and work towards addressing this problem. So of course, the title of this webinar is promise for you to learn about innovative strategies across rural and diverse regions. We're going to start with our panelists who are located in rural areas in Maine and West Virginia. Then we will conclude with our panelists who are located in the urban area. So we're going to start off with the story of Maine. Dr. Jason Judd, please kick us off by telling us about the context in Maine, along with the exciting work you're leading in partnership with the Maine State Department of Education to strengthen teacher recruitment and retention. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Betsy, for the introduction and certainly helpful. I'm happy to be part of the conversation and share some of the great work that's happening in Maine with members across the country that are joining in today. As mentioned, I'm Jason Judd. I'm the Executive Director of Educate Maine, and we're a business-led education advocacy organization that's really focused on increasing education attainment in the state. We believe that in order to have a strong economy, we've got to have a strong education system, and we've got to support the people working in that system. So we very much are at sort of that intersection between the education community and the business community. Our board's actually made up of 2/3 business leaders and 1/3 educators that help guide our work and set our long-term agenda as an organization. As an organization where we have 15 employees that are working in all 16 counties all across the state, and are doing great work locally as well as with state and federal advocacy efforts. Now, as an organization, one of our strategic priorities is focused on expanding and supporting Maine's teacher workforce. Our board believes and our staff believe that investing in teachers are a key strategy to improving our education system and making sure that Maine students have positive education outcomes. So they are passionate about the teaching workforce. They're passionate about all the policy areas that relate to the teaching workforce. They are people that say educators should be paid more than other industries and should be making $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 for the work that they do each year. So they are passionate in all of our work, which is great to have. So what I wanted to do today was to talk a little bit about our Teach Maine Center specifically, which is a program that we've been working on since last year. And it's a program that's designed for teachers by teachers. We're currently actually building it with Maine teachers all across the state. It's not a physical center, but instead it's an initiative. It's a program that's really focused on growing, supporting, and diversifying the educator workforce specifically. We have a teaching crisis in Maine in terms of we have a whole bunch of openings and not enough teachers to fill them. Many positions go unfilled as the school year progresses, which certainly directly connects to student outcomes and student experiences. And there's a number of organizations, 2 of which are on this call, that are passionate about work in this area. So the Teach Maine Center is all about, as I said, supporting the educator workforce in the state. In terms of activities, some of the work that we're doing are things like providing high quality professional development and teacher leadership opportunities for in-service teachers. We're developing mentoring programs for new teachers. We're partnering with local school districts on teacher recruitment and retention strategies. We're addressing key policy changes to improve the profession. We're improving data collection efforts to better understand the teaching profession. And we're collaborating with key statewide partners to expand the pathways into teaching. So this is very much the early days of the design process, but excited to be part of this conversation today. As I mentioned, this is not our organization then sort of mapping out our strategic plan over the next 3 to 5 years for the teacher workforce. We're actually working hand in hand with educators from all 16 counties to do that work directly with us. And I'll share a little bit about that in a few minutes. But before I do that, I'd love to go to the next slide and tell you a little bit more about Maine to set the context. So obviously this webinar is focused on rural strategies in rural states specifically. As many of you know, Maine is a very rural state in the country. It's typically in the top three, in terms of rural status. 50% of the land in Maine is actually almost completely uninhabited. So our population is very much in particular parts of the state. We have about 1.4 million people living in Maine and about 173,000 students from pre-K through 12. So pretty small numbers in terms of population. 38% of the students in pre-K through 12 are economically disadvantaged, and 13% are students of color specifically. Now, within Maine, we have about 14,000 educators in the pre-K through 12 space and 7,500 early childhood educators. So a huge workforce that competes against, many other industries in terms of size. We think of educators very similarly as we think about nurses and other folks that are really giving back to their communities and giving back to families specifically. On average here in Maine, the average teacher has 15 years of experience, is age 46, and makes about $60,000 a year as teachers. And as you might imagine, that puts us, we have some older teachers on average, and we need to recruit more folks from the traditional kind of higher education programs into teaching in Maine, and our wages are lower than a lot of the other New England states specifically. So we have some challenges even looking at our regional counterparts. This grid or this map of Maine shows where the Maine educators are located in the state, with the kind of the dark blue being the most populated areas in terms of numbers of teachers, and the lighter green being the most rural. So if you're familiar with Maine, we sort of have the greater Portland area that has hundreds and thousands of teachers, and then the Bangor area, which also has quite a few educators. Maine is a local control state with a part-time legislature. But the good news about Maine is that everyone has sort of one degree of separation from another. So like you sort of know everybody, you know who's doing the work, you know who to reach out to, you know who to have conversations with, which is a great asset in sort of a large geographic state, but sort of small in terms of numbers of organizations and professionals. Now, what I wanted to do in this webinar was talk a little bit about our relationship with the Maine Department of Education. They helped launch the Teach Maine Center, and they have been right there with us since the first day, saying, we also support the teacher workforce as an administration. This is a key area, a key group of people that we want to support moving forward. They, as a department, published what's called the Teach Maine Plan, which is a plan that sort of guides the state's efforts towards teacher recruitment and retention. We agree with a lot of the work in that plan specifically, and we went to them and said, how can we help? How can Educate Maine help as a nonprofit, a business-led nonprofit? How can we help stand up this work and move forward with implementation? And as a result of some of those conversations directly with their Commissioner of Education, as well as Department of Ed staff, and conversations with our Maine Department of our Maine State Board of Education, we were able to develop an agreement and a contract with the Department of Ed for funding and for specific deliverables to stand up the Teach Maine Center and to do very strategic work to support the workforce. And that's been so important to our work as a nonprofit, and really to make sure we're working hand in hand with the Department of Education. We meet with them every other week. They are at all of the events that we do. We are talking to them about strategy and what we can do better. And they are true partners and believe in this work long beyond a particular administration, and are trying to lay the groundwork to make sure that this work happens for decades to come, not just the next couple of years. So in addition to the Department of Ed, we have two other funding sources that are really important to us, and especially with folks around the state. Philanthropy has been particularly important. The John T. Gorman Foundation has supported our work. We're going to be moving ahead with two pilots with local districts, one in Lewiston and one in Washington County, which is one of our most rural communities, on local efforts on teacher recruitment and retention, and actually supporting cohorts of aspiring educators and emergency certified teachers specifically. So they've been great partners. And then also the U.S. Department of Education, we were recently awarded an earmark or a congressionally directed spending application to be able to fund the work of the center moving forward. That'll come into play this summer with pilot programming, data collection, and building partnerships statewide. So I wanted to spend my last bit of time here on these next couple of slides. So if we go to the next one, if you take one thing away from my presentation and conversation, it's the importance of teacher voice. So what I've done on these next couple of slides is we've spent more than 6 months traveling all across the state, hosting county focus groups in every region, inviting teachers to come together in the evenings and on weekends to give us input on the Teach Maine Center. They've spent hours with us having conversations about how we should strategize as an organization and with this work, what we should focus on to support the teacher workforce and aspiring teachers, what policy areas that we should work on. And these are just some quotes from them about teaching, about some of the barriers, about what they hope the Teach Maine Center will do for them and for the state specifically. And it's so incredibly powerful. We've had teacher leaders not only at every focus groups, dozens of them on weekends, but also on our design team, in consultant roles, in leadership roles, really going hand in hand with us, planning this work moving forward. So let's go to the next slide. Here's a few more quotes about the day that they spent with us, about how important their voices are, how excited they were to be able to talk to people across different districts and be part of this planning effort. So just really encourage anybody on here that's focused on this issue is make sure teachers are at every part of the process and that they're at the table specifically. Let's go to the last slide. And these are just some of our next steps. So what we're going to be working on next. So it's a combination of some publications and some data reports that will be going out based on these focus groups, some stakeholder meetings, some of the local pilots with a couple of different counties, and then some statewide pilot programming. And then certainly we're working on sustainable funding as well. So with that, I've taken my time and I look forward to having conversations throughout the next hour or so with my colleagues on the call.
Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate that. And just the focus groups alone is very powerful. So I really appreciate all your work. Now we're going to turn it over to Dr. Flynn Ross. Since you're also in Maine and have an important story to share that is building out Maine's teacher pipeline, tell us about your leadership with Maine teacher residency and how that came about in the first place, and what are your goals and plans for sustainability are.
Great, thank you, Betsy. And yes, building on Jason's context setting in Maine, the teacher residency, if you can go to the next slide, is built on a lot of literature around grow your own. And just to set this is referencing nationwide data and some of the economics behind it, that 60% of teachers come back and teach within 20 miles of where they went to high school. So the importance of investing in your local workforce and your local people is huge, and that the cost of replacing a teacher when they leave is $9,000 to $40,000 each, depending on where you are, and that there's a hyperlink there to an online calculator. But nationwide, it's estimated to be $8 billion right now wasted on teacher turnover, and how much better we could invest that in high quality teacher preparation, which decreases the turnover. When we have a lot of emergency and unprepared teachers, the turnover increases and we're actually spending more and more. When we invest in high quality teacher preparation, we decrease that turnover and all those costs. So models such as career ladders, differentiated work descriptions that honor mentor teachers and help retain them and give a little bit of moderated job entry. Teaching is one of the few careers where your first year and your 30th year can be the same job description. Let's recognize that those new teachers are just starting and cut them a little slack and a little time to learn. So career ladders like Maryland's piloting can really help support new teachers. And like Betsy was saying, in Texas, the connections back into the high schools. In Maine, we've started the Future Teacher Academy. So reaching back into high schools with dual credit, high school college credits, help kids understand career exploration and decide if teaching is where they want to go, and have them graduate high school with credits they can bring right into teacher prep programs. Educators Rising is a national program with a lot of scholarships and support for new teachers, with clubs in high schools. That's also well regarded and supported by Delta Kappa. Next slide, please. So the Maine teacher residency started in collaboration with some school districts that were looking for ways to grow their teaching workforce. And it really took off in 2020 with the pandemic and the CARES Act funding, and the need for suddenly many more teachers in order for social distancing. So one of our local districts was absolutely committed to bringing all of their K-8 students in high poverty back to schools in person. But that meant they needed a lot more teachers and a lot more classrooms really fast. So they partnered up with teacher prep programs and created some residencies. In 2022, the Maine teacher residency officially started statewide in collaboration with many teacher prep programs, with a congressionally designated spending earmark of nearly $1 million that we've now used over 3 years. Last year in the legislature, LD 1608 was passed to support teacher residencies. The bill requested $1 million. It was funded at $200,000. So we're trying to roll over some of that earmark to keep going next year, and then we don't know what's happening. Next slide, please. So part of what the residency does, there's many models of residencies. They've been primarily in large urban areas, Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles, Philly. They have had residencies for over 20 years. In rural areas, they have to take on a little different context, because in large areas, school districts can commit to, we're going to hire 100 new teachers next year. And we're going to invest in training and recruiting them because we know we're going to have those many openings. In Maine, we have over 200 districts. And so districts don't know what they're going to be hiring next year. So they can't commit to that investment and then hiring them the next year because they aren't quite sure. So we've adapted the residency program for the rural areas by supporting paid student teaching internships, where we do have that teacher shortage Jason was talking about. So positions that are already budgeted but are remaining unfilled, ed techs, emergency and conditionally certified teachers. So our students filling those vacancies, and then our programs, our EPPs, adapting our program to accept that employment as the internship. And we've moved all of our courses after school and or online to accommodate full-time working students. They are tired. They are working really hard, and we've adapted our curriculum to meet the needs of teachers of record in the classroom. The Maine teacher residency has served 80 residents so far, and their mentors or cooperating teachers, with 50 more positions for next year. And as I said, these residencies in some models have been researched for over 20 years and are nationally networked with the National Center on Teaching Residencies with research. But they take on very different looks in different places. You can go to the next slide, please. So as we've adapted it in Maine, the qualifications are that they have to be employed year-long in an educator position. That means a para-educator, teacher, long-term sub. They're completing their coursework for their professional certification. They work all year with a mentor teacher, and they must have at least 90 college credits. So we are working with undergrads and grads. For this, the residents receive $3,500 for tuition support. And we're supporting the other end of the continuum of the veteran teachers by recognizing mentors with a $3,000 stipend. In exchange for that stipend, they are mentoring, and they are part of a statewide mentoring network that meets once a month for 90 minutes online. Being able to connect with other mentor teachers has been really valuable, especially in a rural state. We also provide a lot of advising on which coursework to meet their professional certification and where to get that coursework. Okay. Next slide, please. So what's unique to the Maine teacher residency is that we're utilizing the funding for districts' existing positions. Most teacher residencies in large urban areas create positions for residencies. This grant funding was not enough to create positions. Rather, we're utilizing positions that are already funded in the districts. And that our partners are many teacher prep programs across the state, as well as over 30 school districts. So we're in that local control, there's a lot of variation in what's happening in the different districts and EPPs. Our next steps is working on funding to keep going. Induction supports, the literature on residencies really says those first couple of years of induction, and we have not been able to do that thus far. And differentiating our mentoring workshop. We have come to recognize that some mentors have been doing it for 20 years and some are brand new and really needing to honor their very different experience. So that's what I got. Thank you. Glad to take questions.
Thank you, Flynn. That's really exciting, promising work. Just some questions for Flynn and also Jason. I know this is a big question that I know districts have that I've talked to. You know, how do we spark the interest at the high school level to go into this pathway of teaching, knowing that what's out there in the media and everything and all of the challenges of teaching? How do we spark that interest to be like, hey, you know, we have this opportunity for you? How do you start that process?
I'll say that Future Teachers Academy that we've developed with one of our partner districts is a 4-course 2-year sequence. The first course is exploring teaching as a profession and getting the high school kids to go volunteer back in their elementary and middle schools so that they're getting hands-on experience in the teaching role. So that has been, and now we have 4 other districts interested in that model. So, and it has also fit into the pre-apprenticeship. So residencies and apprenticeships, apprenticeships are a little bit different. Residencies more at the final year, apprenticeships at the beginning of the journey toward the bachelor's. And the pre-apprenticeship is this exploring teaching as a career with the dual college credits has been very helpful.
And I would just add to that, I mean, Dr. Ross is absolutely correct. We've got to work very closely with K-12 schools and bridge, you know, teachers with folks that are aspiring teachers are interested. I think also we need to change the narrative around teaching, you know, and which is why we wrote into some of our funding to sort of the be a teacher campaign, if you will. We, you know, a lot of other industries are talking about the wonderful things about their industry and why young people should join, and we've got to be doing the same thing for our young people so that they hear just as much about going into education as they do nursing or engineering or construction, so that they can see this as a wonderful profession for them to be a part of, and a profession that they can be a part of in their own backyards without going too far from home.
Thank you, Jason. I completely agree with that. We have to control the narrative, like you said. And also, Flynn or even Jason, with the mentorship programs or mentors, I love the fact that, you know, you're reevaluating that. Do you have an opportunity for students to provide you feedback of, hey, this mentor was beneficial, or this process is there opportunity for that feedback? I know, Jason, you mentioned the focus groups too, do you provide the opportunity for students in order to improve programs?
Yes, at the university and EPPs, there's certainly course feedback and mentor feedback. And over the years, it's interesting. It's so much about the student mentor match. And so a great mentor for one student may not be a great mentor for another student. And so we do try to have them meet each other and have that personality match before. And we find there's really good fall mentors who are really good modelers is a little different than a spring mentor who's willing to release. And sometimes the really good modelers are not so good at releasing. So at different phases, mentoring needs differentiation just like teaching does.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Thank you, Flynn. Jason, anything you'd like to add to that?
I would just say, we're in the early phases of so much of our design work, but as you could tell from my comments about teacher voice, as we develop our programs there, the teachers are going to help us co-design those programs, and then we're going to be doing the same thing with students as we think about student programming, is really taking the folks with the lived experiences and helping them co-design. And then certainly because we have 3 kind of different funding streams that all have evaluation components, we've built in a lot of evaluation work to look at sort of, how our programs are impacting both young people as well as educators. So, so that we can constantly seek feedback to evolve, because as we know, teaching evolves and young people's aspirations evolve, and we need to change our programs as a result of that as each year passes.
Thank you so much, both of you, for the work. And then Glenn, just wanted to highlight that's so true. It was interesting to see your statistics on the Grow Your Own program, that 60% of students, and that 20 miles within, we have to, pull those students in and work with our area and grow our own and be intentional with that. So that's so crucial. I think we're gonna have to be creative as well. I thought another thing that was in highlighting both of you was the funding piece, being very strategical. I know, like you mentioned, Flynn, there were some positions not filled. So, okay, let's get strategic. We have those funds allotted. So what are we going to do with that in order to fill those positions? And so, we have to get creative here. It's not as, Jason, you were saying, we have to control the narrative, but also be mindful of how do we fund those things? And because, we want to keep that going. And so I think it's great work that y'all are both doing. I appreciate it. Well, we're staying on the topic of recruitment. We're going to turn next and we're going to head to West Virginia to hear from Dr. Nathan Sorber, who has been involved with the Teacher Ascend initiative to recruit teachers to live and teach in West Virginia. Pass it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Very excited to be here. I'm Nate Sorber from the School of Education at West Virginia University. I really appreciate my friends from Maine bringing up some really important themes that were mentioned. First of all, this notion of the Grow Your Own initiatives, other residency initiatives that we've seen that focus not only retaining teachers, but that 60% statistic that we've already heard about students staying close to where they're from and where they teach. And also this idea of narrative, of how we explain the profession, how we encourage folks to get into the teaching profession or come into our schools in our various locations. Well, I don't want to say this is an alternative, but this is another approach to think about, because what do you do when you are in a state when you have you're facing a demographic cliff on your 18 to 22 traditional age population, in which that pool of potential teachers is shrinking, and also that you have numerous vacancies in classrooms in very high need districts across your state. And this is really just one initiative. It's a program to recruit folks out of state to come into West Virginia. So if we go to the next slide, this program is built off of another initiative, the Ascend West Virginia program. It was just featured on Good Morning America a few days ago, which was a program born during the COVID epidemic. This is Brad Smith, former Intuit CEO and president of Marshall University, who helped support and fund a project to recruit remote workers into West Virginia, that they would get a $20,000 stipend to relocate, and they would get funding for other activities to really, as we think about this narrative idea, to capture what's great about West Virginia, the outdoor economy, the small town living, and create a cohort of people, cohort of workspaces, folks to integrate, work, and live and play in West Virginia. And it was a very successful program, and we've seen more states engage in this type of recruitment activities incentivized to say, hey, give our rural states a look. So we build off this idea, this flywheel idea, is that how do we build off that capacity, not only knowledge gain, but professionals that are kind of working in that space to help recruit teachers. So we pitched this idea in terms of teacher recruitment, or a teacher ascend program. We got a seed grant from Remake Learning and the Benedum Foundation to fund, first of all, kind of background research on this project, and then a pilot of teacher ascend that we are in right now. So if we move to the next slide, the challenge is similar to as we discussed in we saw in Maine. We had 1,200 open teaching vacancies in the last cycle. We have as I've already said, high need districts without certified teachers. We also have, these are not great statistics to live, but lowest percentage ranking on high school graduates pursuing higher ed opportunities. And intersections of these challenges are prevalent in some of our rural counties. Even within West Virginia context, we have counties, they're very high need, very low graduation rates, and very high vacancies and needs of teachers. So that's the challenge. When we think about narratives, we're also aware that there's an opportunity in front of us. You can go to the next slide. So the opportunity in front of us is, yes, while we are ranked at the bottom of on the salary scale when you compare to other states, we also have a narrative out there that, adjusted for cost of living, we actually look a little bit better in terms of our comparative starting salary of for teachers of folks who consider moving in. We also have other things that we wanted to be part of our narrative, including recent survey data. Teachers say in terms of the availability of mentoring, leadership support in schools, expenditures per pupil. We exceed the national average, right? And these statistics, they're not all perfect, but the reality is that there's a story to tell, that these are quality schools that you could be interested in, and we have some competitive advantages for aspiring teachers to consider. If you go to the next slide. So with our seed money for Remake Learning, we benchmarked other teacher core programs, recruitment programs around the country. And some of the things we found, similar to what's aligned with the broader West Virginia Ascend program, is that many of these teacher core programs were really unified in this idea of being responsive to the community, right? What the local schools needed, what was important, and also that there would be synergy with things that were already in place, right? We didn't have the resources to recreate the wheel. So in looking at programs from across the country, talking to a lot of folks, we centered on our mission. We're looking for folks committed to West Virginia, leveraging our assets that we have in our state. Our universities, their opportunities to provide continuing education for candidates was another aspect of the mission that we saw central. Obviously, we heard from teachers that the financials matter, right? Not just the incentives of salary, but moving when you're just out of college, right? The relocation, getting settled, being able to find housing. These were real considerations that we heard. And ultimately, it became clear to have these essential considerations of finding the right balance between these financial incentives, continuing education, but also this creation of community, right? How could we create this space of say, you're not coming into the state alone, that you could move in and be part of a network and part of a community. So next slide. So we knew who our target market was, folks who were committed to education, obviously, interested in the small town kind of vibe that proliferate our state. Those that might be interested again in our somewhat our differentiator, right? Our outdoor recreation, our outdoor economy, that aspect of the lifestyle. How do we turn that narrative to say West Virginia, teaching in West Virginia is important, and also a narrative of we can support and provide ongoing education and professional development for advancement in your career. Next slide, please. So we want West Virginia to be a destination for high quality teachers, not just the folks we train are, within state, which is important, but also a destination for folks outside the state. Create pathways for ongoing learning and mentorship, because we want these folks to stay and be retained, not just come in briefly, and be a high quality, sustainable teacher in a host of high need spaces. Next slide, please. So as we're marketing this program, it really is a marketing endeavor, right? We are saying to teachers, you can obtain tuition assistance towards a master's degree or professional development. You will get a mentor. You're assigned a mentor as part of our mentorship program. You heard about residency models in Maine. It's partnering on those same type of mentors specific to this population. We provide concierge support, people looking for summer jobs, to provide support in that space. A $6,000 stipend, community network gathering, social gathering, service projects for all our ascenders, and other access to the outdoor economy that was similar to the other Ascend program. Next slide, please. So again, this network, this idea of creating these personal kind of touches, these curated activities, connecting our folks with not just the teacher Ascend cohort, but the broader Ascend cohort. And we want folks who are coming into the program, who are moving in, to have a community at the get-go in similar ways to their student teaching cohort, right? Or their grad school cohort that they're moving into our community, so they have that family to help with that, those retention goals in the program as well. Next slide, please. So just a little bit on where the program is. We opened the program in spring 24. Where our pilot program, $250,000, supported by the Benedum Foundation, is recruiting 10 teachers. They get all those benefits for 2 years. They obviously have to be college graduates. They have to live out of state, move into West Virginia. And we have 2 county partners, Mon County and Preston County, school systems in the northern part of West Virginia. Next slide, please. So I think one of the important takeaways is what this has allowed for our school partners has really created a degree of sophistication in recruitment and selection. We have, partnered with them at recruitment fairs in terms of talking about these opportunities, but we've really tried to bring a sophisticated recruitment operation to our under-resourced county partners to engage in marketing activities, not just of marketing of the entire project or marketing of the state, but helping them tell their story, their narrative about their schools, about their opportunities, about teaching in their spaces. We get, focused communications, marketing, and recruitment has been critical to this effort. You can see our website. I believe that's being shared. I get to my final slides, please. So as I said, our goal is to have this, a pilot that we can spread to a proof of concept that we can spread to the rest of the state. And we've learned a lot already, but one of these kind of major outcomes is how we develop extensive marketing campaigns with our county partners to help them actually strategically engage in sophisticated campaigns to tell their story and recruit people into their space, but also showing how these other incentives, community building, continuing education, and mentorship, can help recruit and retain folks into West Virginia. Next slide, please. So it's very early on. We have almost filled our 10 spots. Our 27 kind of highly qualified applicants that are under consideration right now have come from all over the country. West Virginia has a lot of border states that often steal teachers from us. This is like the first time there's a we're hearing these stories of that being reversed in some degree. Not that it's a zero sum game, but just to give you an idea that West Virginia is able to tell its story and attract candidates into the state in ways that we perhaps haven't been able to before. This is just some news stories. We're obviously very excited. I would just say one last time that there's just one tool in the toolkit in the recruitment process, and I enjoyed sharing it with you all today.
Thank you so much, Nate. Just a question too. What types of supports and or support services are provided for or available for these students? I know this is new, but what are some supports to ensure that ensure completion and credentials?
Yeah, so we have supports on the front end. I mean, the applicants who are coming into the program need to be certified teachers, right? They have to be hired by a partner district, so we're in that partnership. But once they arrive and are part of this program, they're part of the mentorship network. Each is assigned a mentor outside of their school, connected part of our university network. They're part of a community network where there's, we have personnel and staff that manage these, social activities, this kind of community engagement. We provide supports for on the housing, on the relocation questions, and other types of relocation questions that they may have, in addition to the stipend, which is
Yes, it's really nice. With I noticed that the applicants, of course, we have a little spread across the US. So I would assume, is this an online program, or is this hybrid, or is it in person?
Yeah, so the program, everyone, I mean, the key of the program is making people relocate into West Virginia. So
Okay.
our candidates that are in California have shown an interest to apply to this program, relocate to West Virginia, use these resources to relocate and be part of the West Virginia teaching force. So yes, everybody in this first cohort will be teaching at one of our county schools in person and relocating to West Virginia.
It's so interesting to see. Just your map is eye-opening. They're willing to move and invest in this. So that's great.
Yeah, and I just my only last piece of that is just this. What's been so fascinating to us is that this narrative idea really matters. I mean, these other supports are critically important, but we've learned so much that especially rural districts, underserved counties, it's very difficult. We recruit in traditional ways, right? We put jobs up on our website. We don't engage and tell the story about why these could be good opportunities. That can't be the only thing, because the story has to be based on something on the ground. But we have learned a lot that there are people very interested in this, in what we have to offer.
No, I'm glad you said that, Nate, because we have to be, just like I mentioned earlier, you have to be creative on recruiting and think outside the box of how do we pull that teacher interest in, because I mean, like you said, we're beyond the, hey, post in a job and, oh, they're just going to come in floods. Yes. And so thank you for that. I appreciate your work.
Thank you.
So we're going to continue on with the theme of innovation going, and we're going to turn it on to our final speaker, last but not least, Dr. Audrey Rogers, to share about innovative partnerships between her institution, Southern New Hampshire University, and AmeriCorps to strengthen the teacher recruitment pipeline. Audrey, I would like to invite you to share any key themes that you have heard from other presentations and how your work also resonates with those, or any new themes from your work that you'd like to lift up. I'm sorry, Dr. Rogers, I think you're muted, dear.
Oh, my apologies. Right,
Okay.
that's the line, right, since COVID.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm just so pleased to be here and hear the impressive work of my colleagues. Yes, I'm at Southern New Hampshire University. Uh, I oversee graduate education programs. That's the next slide. Our mission is to empower individuals to transform learners and communities. And so while we are here in Manchester, New Hampshire, we really serve educators, local, regional, national levels. And to give a geographic context, as some of my colleagues have done, on the next slide, you can see where New Hampshire is placed up here in the Northeast. Wonderful area, fairly rural generally, but we are in the most populous city. But we are close to the beach and close to Boston. And you may have seen a commercial or two of SNHU. That is our online division, and they are located in a different part of Manchester here on campus. It's just a beautiful time of year with 300 acres and about 4,000 students. And that's where my office is. And that's where these programs I want to talk about today and the ones I oversee, this is where we are located. And so graduate education programs, 4 major areas. One I will talk about today, which is our clinical, we call them our clinical MEDs or apprenticeships, residencies, and we span, the early childhood through secondary licensure areas for those. But we also have really innovative program for new and veteran teachers in their educator practices. So this is synchronous with asynchronous work on an accelerated timeline to meet teachers' needs where they are. We also have professional learning. So we work with partners, school districts, organizations in order to have just-in-time courses that they offer their teachers to meet their needs, advance their salary, and really support teachers where they're at. And finally, our doctoral program, Thriving Community. We just had our first doc talk that we're doing on AI, and that's hybrid accelerated model. But today is about our clinical MEDs. And so for the model of this program, on the next slide, you can see that we offer licensure from early childhood, elementary, all the way through secondary. And both of these are built the same. When I was a former high school social studies turned full-time faculty member for 15 years, faculty got together and created this program. And it was so successful at the elementary level, I created it, replicated it for secondary. That's my area, secondary. And so it's 36 credits, accelerated. It's about a 1-year program. And we really have wraparound support. We have 3 faculty members every term across, the 4 terms that meet with students every week. So for content courses, they meet twice a week on campus. And our clinical course as part of this program is all day with students. They're going into the schools all day long. During the summer, we participate in summer programming to get them ready for September. And then for the duration of the school year, they are in a school district working one-on-one with a mentor teacher. So we have the professors, the mentor teacher, and then SNHU hires a supervisor that comes in to also evaluate and support our candidates. And then we have a program director who oversees everything and makes sure that everything's running smoothly. And the design is intentional to be a cohort model so that there is really strong peer-to-peer support, which improves a sense of belonging and retention. These are really the key components, and the very strong collaboration with the practicing teachers about what is needed. So when they come to class, it's not ivory tower, let me teach you about classroom management. It's what did you see today? What did you do today? Now let's go back tomorrow, have you try something different, come back to class. And we would brainstorm together as a group on how to handle different situations. So that's the model of the K through 12. So the next slide talks about the timeline. So we start once a year, July 1, we go through to about July 1. And we actually right now, we're just getting people prepped and ready to begin their courses for the that start during the 1st of July, that first week. And the instructors are preparing them for their placements. They're getting everyone up and ready for the school year. And they are beginning to immerse our students into the Manchester community. So you're very connected to campus and you're very connected to our partner, the Manchester School District. So we have one model with 2 funding streams. So if you go to the next slide, I'll talk about Manchester Excels. So this was modeled after the successful elementary program. And I really struggled to find a funding source, to be honest with you. I'll tell you about elementary in a minute, but I spent a summer looking at what grants were available. And I was fortunate enough to connect with people like Goodwill Northern New England, part of AmeriCorps. And so that has been the funding source, and it has been really life-changing for people. So it is a co-enrollment program. So they are enrolled as an MED student at SNHU, but then they are co-enrolled as an AmeriCorps volunteer. So because of that, the living allowance, this cohort's upcoming is $22,000 for the year, and then they'll get almost $9,000 in an educational award. So that exceeds the cost of the degree program. But bigger than that, these students, when they join this program, it's not just, I'm going to go, into this program and student teach. They take on the identity of an AmeriCorps volunteer. They do AmeriCorps training. They become a part of the community and they've joined something that's really bigger than themselves. And they're the president of AmeriCorps, Michael Smith, and one of our senators was recently in town and presented the big check, for this year as a great news story. But what came out of it from the students who were there was the support that they had, that they felt that they were just part of something very special and giving back to the community. Some who were from the Manchester area coming back into the Manchester area. So you can see our licensure options for secondary, and all the interns earn a certificate in transdisciplinary competencies with 2 STEM education badges. These are digital badges. On the next slide, you can see our model for the early childhood and elementary licensure program. And the funding support here is through Title I funds through the Manchester School District, our strong partner. And that's $1,000 a month during the 10 months that they're in the school. And so in both cases, these students are with practicing teachers all day long who are overseeing and guiding them, and then coming, and their clinical instructor from SNHU, and then coming back twice a week to campus to learn from faculty, the theory, the assessment, the technology, and all of the coursework that then supports their actions during the day with the students. And so this particular program has been functioning for about 7 years and definitely could be replicated into other areas. In fact, I think Michael Smith made that comment. He said, we need to bring this other places. And I said, absolutely. I mean, we happen to be located in Manchester, New Hampshire, which for New Hampshire is very urban, but it definitely could take place in other areas. We're very excited about how agile our programming is, how we can personalize to different teachers wherever they may be. That's one of the strengths of Southern New Hampshire University. And so I was asked really to think about, looking at all the work of my colleagues and my own, and kind of what are the big parts here. So if you go to the next slide, my major takeaways from what I was hearing was collaboration. I mean, when you listen to, Jason talk about all the different groups that he has had to collaborate with, as well as Flynn and Nate, we can't go this alone, right? We have to have IHEs, institutions of higher education, universities, partner with school districts, agencies, Department of Education in order to make this happen. You also heard myself and some of my colleagues talk about a variety of funding streams. This is important not only to attract people, but we need to, retain them through this financial support. We need to reduce their educational debt so that they don't go into debt in order to become a teacher or to have a career change. You also heard about innovative models, and there are a lot of them. And I think the call to action is to find out what works in your area and find out who you can partner with and what universities can do, their schools of education, their faculty, and what other agencies you can partner with, be it school districts or philanthropy or other governmental agencies that could help you develop the workforce, because it truly is workforce development. Our partnership with the Manchester School District has resulted in them hiring a large percentage of our graduates right out of this program. So not only do you have people who want to become teachers working with, in many cases, veteran teachers and infusing them with all the new research that they're hearing about in their classes, you have models. You heard Flynn talk about changing curriculum and programming modalities in order to make this all work. And that's what we're doing here at SNHU. That's what my colleagues are doing in order to address the need. You heard Jason talk strongly about centering teacher voice, but centering the needs of K-12 educators in general and their pupils, right? And that's really important. What are they asking for? What are the needs post-COVID, or whatever's the new normal? What are the needs, be it coursework or supports, trainings, professional learning experience? How can we help current teachers survive, stay in the field? That's what's essential across a lot of what we're hearing today and the reality of education. But the one phrase that I think I would overlay all of this, and Jason said it, was passion. It was passion, dedication to the work. And I heard that across everyone. I know all the people that I talk with, this is what they're about. This is about our future, our pupils in K-12, and supporting them and the teachers who are serving them, and their administrators and everyone associated in those schools, districts, parents, and communities. So I hear it from my students. I'm a part of something bigger. I'm an AmeriCorps volunteer. I'm a teacher. I'm in a powerful place, and I think that's what we're all looking to do here, is find a model that works in various areas to help everyone out.
Obviously, thank you, Audrey. I appreciate you identifying all the different themes and all of the our panelists today, and sharing that information. But just a question for you, Audrey. A couple questions, if you're okay with answering these. Just, you mentioned about funding. I think this is something that across the board we're hearing. What are some techniques like braiding and blending of funding that you can further elaborate on, or just some advice for our viewers here? How do they go about that? Because I'm sure that they will love to, implement a lot of these innovative ideas, but how do they go about it, and where do they start?
I spent about a month just searching grants and what would fit. And some grants, really need to be an R1 university. And so I kept looking and I kept looking and I kept looking. And that's when I hit on, there's workforce development grants. I heard Flynn say, grow your own, the residency. So they're out there. Look under workforce, look under all the different organizations that put out the various calls for grants. That's one. And then the school districts themselves, like what kind of, what's there, how creative can you get, whether it's an existing position that I heard people talked about, where you're adding on to that, or what we're talking about is just a stipend for, and then the whole, negotiation between, well, what does that look like, and how do we make that work to, have the benefit come back to the school district?
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, for funders like myself, as well as district and state agencies involved in these relationships, thinking about what principles can we prioritize when working with current and future teachers in our communities, and and states? And additionally, how can we effectively implement this guidance in our practice? Like, how do we move forward with this?
So was that a rhetorical question, or do you, how do we move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I know you mentioned, we have to get creative, and then the funding is an issue. That's what I hear from the districts. And I think too, one of the key themes and partnerships that you mentioned was, well, the key word is partnerships. We have to have that communication with the K-12, along with our universities and our community colleges as well. And those opportunities, is how do we leverage that? I mean, it is kind of rhetorical, but it's one of those things that how do we build on that? And then we'll go ahead and include all of our panelists here too, and feel free to jump in. To our panelists, like, what advice would you give to our attendees today, especially those that work in local and state levels, and how to strengthen this work in our communities and states around teacher recruitment and retention? And where should they start? Because I think that is the underlying question. Some of the Q&A questions that I just previewed was that, where do I start from here? Does anybody want to jump in and kind of target that?
I can jump in. I'm happy to talk a little bit, because we're on the early end of some of our work with the Maine Center, and I think it just starts with conversations and relationship building. I mean, the first thing you have to do is, you might not know about amazing work that's happening in your own state, unless you sort of get in your car and go have some conversations with the pre-service teaching institutions, with school districts, with others. Like, I do think it's helpful to kind of get a bit of a landscape of what's happening and who's doing what and where funding is coming in and which models are being used. Because I think through that, at least for us, we've been able to build partnerships and to come together and look at group, sort of funding that could be with both our organization and potentially others. So I really think, certainly we can apply for grants and those types of things, but it really just starts with, you're passionate about this area and you want to be helpful. Try to find other people like you and other organizations like you that sort of have similar shared goals and want to make some collective impact in your state, and then see what you can do together. So I know that's a bit simplistic, but I feel like that's where it starts, because everybody cares about teachers, and they want to make sure kids have an excellent education, so it's very much sort of a nonpartisan, at least from my experience, issue that a lot of folks, care deeply about, at least in Maine, and I'm sure they do all across the country. So it's one easy way to get started.
Yes, thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. Anybody else want to add to that?
I'll jump in. Working with the programs that already exist in Maine, we have the scholarships and funding for future teachers of Maine. Oh, Jason, I'm forgetting the name. Fame Maine, our financial authority of Maine.
Educators for Maine is the name of the program.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's legislation appropriation for scholarships for teachers, and it hasn't been revisited. So going back to the legislature and saying, keeping with the times, we really need some more funding in here to help support teachers, helping teachers know, like the AmeriCorps connection that Dr. Rogers is talking about is a great way to leverage other programming that's already there.
Absolutely. Yes.
And I think some of these starting places, Jason was talking about relationships and so forth, but because we're talking about licensure and teaching, education faculty, I was a high school teacher, but I got connected with a faculty member, then you start adjuncting. And so as part of the New Hampshire IHE network, which was all the prep programs in New Hampshire, we all talked to each other about what was happening, what ideas we had, what grants were there. And so those conversations, they happen by intentional effort of people getting together and choosing to meet and talk about what are you seeing and how are you going about it. So going to a teacher prep programs education faculty who have a relationship with the Department of Ed, who know about licensure, how it's done, can oftentimes have those connections and steer you in the right place.
Thank you. we would like to go ahead and get into some of the Q&A with our viewers here. And speaking of getting creative, have any of you had experience with hiring internationally or having some partnerships internationally? Does anybody have any experience with that?
It's funny, I just had an application from an international student. So first thing we did was we contacted the Department of Ed. What are the special rules? And in New Hampshire, they did not, it was not a barrier.
Belinda, you guys say something?
In Portland, we had again a locally grant funded program for years working with our recent immigrants and refugees, partly to diversify the teaching workforce. And so many of them were teachers in their home countries, and bringing that multilingual aspect into our schools so that the teaching population represented our student population was really valuable. They had immigration status in the US already. So, but they had training and sometimes years of experience. Portland High School's chemistry teacher has a PhD in chemistry. I'm working with a gentleman from Iraq right now who has a PhD in physics, who wants to teach math. So we have some really talented immigrants that are great assets to our schools. But they have a lot to learn around classroom management, which in many of their countries does not exist. The kids behave or they leave. And that's very different from the context in the US. So they definitely need a lot of support around the Americanization of education, even if they have some really rich content backgrounds. So we've worked with local immigrants and refugees. When we've tried with international visas, we've found that very hard to work with in Maine.
Thank you, Flynn. I'm glad you touched on it because you're right. I like how you worded that perfectly because, you know, depending on the culture and background, they may not, like you said, they're going to come in or they're going to come out. So there's a lot to learn there. And I think even with any new teachers, but even more when they're coming to America and learning that culture and what the requirements are. So another
In
question.
addition to those requirements of background checks and all these other aspects that a Department of Ed or state may require, that's new to them.
True. That's true.
Yeah, I just wanted to add it's actually a very interesting discussion, because when we think about the intersection of state policy, county's ability or district's ability to sponsor visas, but when you step back, you say this is another population, especially intersecting with colleges that are potential recruitment spaces. And you think about the capacity that may not be there in terms of facilitating that population into teaching. It's something we're thinking about. We've ran into that same problem with Teacher Ascend of not being able to bring in international students because of the sponsor visa issue at counties. But it's another population worth looking at in the recruitment matrix.
Absolutely. Thank you. One of the questions that we had was particularly about the residency programs. Do principals have any hiring autonomy in that process with the residency programs or any of the programs that you have?
What do you mean by autonomy? Do you mean well, a couple things. Our principals hire our students, not because they have to, or that students are required to spend so many years or anything like that, but just that they're good candidates and get hired. So it's a great workforce development, a pipeline. But they also are in part of the interview process about where candidates go in terms of which schools they get placed at. And someone had mentioned fit. Between the mentor, teacher, and the student. I'm not sure if that answers that question.
Yes. Yes. Lynn, were you going to add to that? Okay, well, we lost Flynn. Oh, here she is. I think too, I know there's been districts that I worked with here in East Texas, similar, Audrey, to what you were saying, the principals involved, depending on the need or what they're needing. I know we've had bilingual campuses. If there's somebody's bilingual, to being intentional, putting assigning that so they can have that experience and in teaching Spanish or that mentor program along with the Spanish teacher. So it just that intentionality is still there, along with that communication with the principal and the need there. So. And then one of the questions, I guess, well, it's really one of our viewers mentioned, could you share one of the success stories that you've encountered that kind of just stood out to you with our with any of these pathways or partnerships that you've had?
I'll talk about, so I just mentioned, President of AmeriCorps happened to be in New Hampshire, one of our senators and stuff. So we've done this a couple of years in a row where a senator will come in or congressman and observe one of our teachers in the program. And then we have a roundtable discussion and we talk to the student, and the student this year was a career changer. And so I think one of the success stories in some programs like these are because they're more innovative or agile, a little different, they attract people who always wanted to be a teacher. And part of the financial support, that funding, is instrumental in allowing them to make that shift so that they don't go into debt, that they don't, so that they are enabled to do that. And of course, the higher rate is very, very high in these programs. And so you're helping these students make their dreams come true, whether they're a traditional undergrad going right into, say, a master's program, and the residency, or someone who is changing from a different profession.
Any other success stories you'd like to share? Anybody?
I would just give an example of one of our ascenders in the project, and I think you can think about in our little Preston County, with its own host of challenges, but with its really great people and excellent schools, and we had a high need for an art teacher that they would have trouble filling, and we have an applicant from Arizona and interested in moving their family across to West Virginia, just because there's an alignment, not in there. We have some bad times with West Virginia, sometimes with a deficit mentality in terms of how we look about those opportunities. And it's not just about telling that story, but we made that connection, someone that was looking for that type of experience, that liked the idea of being able to be assisted to make that move and make that connection. And that never would have happened before. And that's a powerful realization in terms of being able to give a mouthpiece to our small rural districts to make connections when they couldn't do that before.
Thank you, Nate. Also, there's been a posting of the short survey poll. We would love to hear your feedback as we continue these questions. We're going to continue some of these questions that we're getting. We also had one of our viewers mentioned they would like for one of you to elaborate the partnerships of replicating that dual credit pathway. How did you start that, and how do you start that collaboration, that partnership? And because obviously there's an interest there with that dual credit. Do you want to explain their process with that, with their dual credit, I believe with the high school and the universities and that partnership?
I can talk about SNHU has a very strong dual enrollment program where we offer education courses in the school so that when they come, they can be even a semester ahead. So one thing we've discovered, it can really shrink the undergraduate years to 3, depends, right? There's always the culminating. We do the same. We do a creative from undergrad into the master's, that overlapping using some of those master's credits to fulfill electives of the undergrad degree. So it's really accelerated. I had a couple of students, English majors, they did their English in 3 years. They came in with dual enrollment, dual credit, AP, and then started their masters and used some of those to finish and then went into the program. Very, very cost saving. Students love it. They love the time saved. They love every aspect about it.
Yeah, and I think we have a, not that this is my presentation, we have a 4-course grow your own program in West Virginia as well. And it's just a, I think one of the kind of takeaways is you got to attack this problem in a lot of different ways. And the grow your own captures a population to get through more quickly, to be able to, as 3 years, if you take full advantage of that credit, or teacher academies that are engaging high school students is one part of that. But I think as we look across all our partnerships, it's a crisis. And that's probably something we hadn't said out loud, but I know in our state, the teacher shortage is a crisis, and having high quality teachers for the next generation is a crisis. And engaging in multiple strategies in multiple contexts is what it's going to take to make a difference.
And I'll just add one piece, if it's okay, which is, we have a robust early college program. We call it the Aspirations program here in Maine, where high schoolers can take college courses for free in a whole variety of subject areas, which has been amazing and a hugely beneficial program. I'll also say, I think some of the first steps with kind of growing more programs in this area in Maine, we've seen our higher education institutions partner very, very closely with school districts, and really strong relationships between the education faculty and school districts specifically, where they're brainstorming programs like this. Like, how can we have more early college offerings within education? How can we bundle those education courses together so that you can have advanced credit going into pre-service teaching programs? How do we bundle them for pre-apprenticeship programs and have those recognized by our Department of Labor, et cetera? So we've got some good work happening in that area. I think they'll actually, in Maine, you'll see so much more of that work over these next couple of years, because we're all collectively working with those traditional high school age students and trying to help make sure many of them go into teaching.
Does anybody else want to add anything before we start wrapping up? Well, thank you, panelists. I think this is a great discussion. I think everybody's doing great work. And just like one of you mentioned that we're all very passionate. Audrey highlighted that, that is a key thing, very passionate. We want to do the work because we know quality teachers is such an importance. Obviously, that impacts our students' academics. And so we want to make sure we have the best out there, and then recruiting and retaining quality teachers in all of our states. And I'll turn it over to our wonderful Mary Kingston. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Betsy, and thank you so much to our presenters. I hope you all took something, I'm sure you did, really valuable away from today's conversation. We're also going to send a follow-up summary email, so you can get this all in one place with links and whatnot. So if we can just quickly pull up our slides just to give you a reminder of upcoming sessions. So as you can see, we really strive to hit different topics that we know are of interest to you. So next week, we're going to be zooming in on family engagement and partnerships that maximize student learning. So please tune into that. The week after that, we're going to be looking at the early childhood workforce and the role of AI. And so in the spirit of innovation that our guests shared with us today, that's where we're going to turn next. We're going to do a holiday rebroadcast on July 2nd, knowing that it's a popular vacation week that week, but we still want to offer something for you to tune into, maybe when you're on the beach or at the pool. So tune into that for EdTech Working. And then we're excited to share with you a session coming up on Tuesday, July 9th that we'll share more information about. Next slide. And then, as Sierra mentioned earlier, please do join us for our GLR Week 2024, which is July 22nd to 26th. It's going to be really great with pressing topics in the field, building on today's conversation as well. So just want to give a big thank you to all of our guests and to our wonderful moderator, Betsy. I know that you all gave a lot of great inspiration and ideas. So thank you so much for your work and best wishes going forward as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Take care.